Hi everyone, my name is Nuria and this is my student journey. And for today's video we're going to create this blouse.
I'm wearing your t-shirt, it smells like roses after rain. Though I storm, I tried to flirt, but you mess with neurons in my brain. When I see you, it's like being struck by lightning. I'm giddy, I'm nervous, and it's honestly so frightening.
This video is the first one out of the series where I show you how to create every day a different blouse based on the basic top pattern. I'm going to show you how to create a dartless body and then how to do some openings, how to put some bias tape, and how to create different styles of sleeves. You don't need previous experience, I'm going to guide you every step of the way. We're going to start by drafting the pattern, then cutting the pattern, putting the pieces together, and finally I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks that you can do to spice it up a little bit. So let's get into it. Let's talk about materials. We're going to need a couple of things. Not all these things are compulsory, but some of them are very nice to have. So the first thing you need, and if you don't have it, you should have it. I'm going to link it down below. It's your basic top pattern. I created a video on how to make this pattern, and if you have your own, that's also fine, but otherwise you can follow me with this one. The next thing you're going to need is some paper. And if you don't have it this big, you can also just use normal paper and tape. A pencil, of course. You're going to need some scissors that are specific for paper because we don't mix paper and fabric. If you don't know, don't do it. And then we're going to need some rulers. These are not 100% needed. So this one, for example, you can do it by hand, but it's a nice to have. And what I always like to have at least is one ruler that has 190 degrees angle, because it's very handy. The next thing we're going to need is our fabric. Pre-wash it, because this was my mistake and some of the blouses I had to make again. Pre-wash it. For this blouse I use cotton and I used about 1 meter. We're going to need bias tape. We're going to need a lot of it if you plan on finishing everything with bias tape. Some other things you're going to need are the fabric scissors, and you should never cut paper with these scissors. It's good if you have one of those pencils that when you iron it, it disappears. I love this thing. Then you're going to need some thread, some needles to leave the things together, and I like to have some normal needles if I want to make some finishes by hand. And for the big machines, you're going to need an iron. This is absolutely super important, because otherwise, if you don't iron the seams flat, you are going to have some problems. So this is your best friend. Then the sewing machine, and optional, the serger. It is not needed if your fabric doesn't fray. My fabric didn't fray and I didn't overlock it, and it was completely fine. But if you have it and you like the finishes with the overlock, then it's a nice to have. And otherwise, if you like to overlock the finishes and you don't have the overlocker, you can always do it with the zigzag stitch with a normal machine. That is everything we're going to need for this blouse, so let's get into drafting.
The first thing we have to do is convert this pattern into a dartless pattern. Starting with the back, draw a line from the tip of the shoulder dart to the armhole notch. Do the same for the front pattern. Now cut through that line and also cut through the shoulder darts. We will transfer the shoulder darts to the armhole. Once that's done, redraw the armhole and the shoulder if needed. And there you have it, the dartless blouse. Now that we have the main structure, we can start modifying it. First, we'll lower the necklines 1 centimeter. After that, we'll make sure that the side seams are perpendicular from the waistline. From there, we can create the A-line. We're gonna add 4.5 centimeters to the waistline and then draw the new side seam. The last thing we have to do is create the opening on the front or on the back, whatever you prefer. You can make it as deep as you want. In my design is 7 centimeters. And here you have front and back. One thing you have to take into account is that what you see right now is on the waist level. If you want your blouse to be longer, you will have to extend it a little bit more. Mine, I extended it about 10 centimeters. Let's draw the sleeve. We're going to start by marking 0 at the top of the paper. We'll measure down 1/3 of the armhole measurement and mark 0.1. From 0, we'll also add the sleeve length down and mark 0.2. From 0.1, we'll add bicep divided by 2 plus 4 centimeters to both sides. They will be 0.3 to the left and 4 to the right. Connect 0.0 and 3 and 0.0 and 4. The left side corresponds to the back. We'll divide that line into 4s and add the numbers 5, 6 and 7. Moving to the front, so the right side, we'll measure from point 4 halfway between 0 and 4 minus 1.8 centimeters and we'll mark point 8. Then we'll divide both sides halfway and mark 0.9 to the left and 10 to the right. Now draw a curve that goes from point 3 to 0.5 centimeters below point 5, crosses point 6, goes 2 centimeters outside of point 7, across point 0, 2 centimeters above point 9, across point 8, 1.5 centimeters below point 10 and ends in point 4. To close off the sleeve, we'll measure from point 2 wrist circumference plus 6.5 centimeter to the right and to the left, and we will connect the sleeve. This sleeve is meant to be a short sleeve, so it's the simplest design you can get. If you plan on making it long, I would add maybe an elbow dart or make a prototype first to make sure that the length is the appropriate one. We have to make sure that the sleeve is going to fit on the armhole and that it's centered. Measure for both front and back where the notches would be. After that, mark where the shoulder seam is situated. You'll see there's some extra fabric on the sleeve, which will give it a round shape. Measure the ease between shoulder seams and mark where the new middle would be. That's the center of your sleeve. Now that you have the main structure of the sleeve, you can shorten it as much as you want. For example, in my design, it's around 22 centimeters. And once you're happy with your length, you can start adding volume if that's what you want. We're going to separate it into little sections. The more sections, the more volume you're going to have in your sleeve. After that, we're going to separate those sections depending on how much volume we want again. For example, in my design, I separated them around 2 centimeters between each other, but the more you separate them, the more volume you will add. And once that's done, you can redraw your sleeve and you'll be able to choose if you want a normal sleeve or a sleeve with volume. And final step, now it's time to add the seam allowances. As you can see, the seam allowances I took into account that I was going to finish it with bias tape, but if you're not going to finish it with bias tape, you should add seam allowances also at the bottom of your blouse and also the sleeves and the neckline. And that's it. I added 1 centimeter, but if you don't feel confident enough to work with 1 centimeter seam allowance, you can always add 1.5 centimeters or 2 centimeters, however you feel more comfortable.
Now we have all the pieces, we've got the fabric, and we have these 3 pieces here. The first thing we're going to do, if you want to do it, if your fabric frays, otherwise it's not necessary, is to overlock the shoulders and the side seams for both front and back. You can do that either with your overlock machine or with your normal machine with the zigzag stitch. Now that the seams have been overlocked, we're going to put right sides together, one over the other one, and then we're going to top stitch on the shoulders and on the sides. We can hold the pieces together with some needles. And now that we have the shoulders and the side seams together, we're going to iron the seams open like this. Now we're done with the body and we're going to focus on the sleeves. It's very important that you mark all the notches on both sleeves and that you have one right one and one left one. Make sure of that because, you know, things happen. And same on the body, you have to make sure that all the notches have been marked. So what we're going to do is add 2 basting stitches from the notches of the front to the notches of the back. I'm going to make sure that I have a straight stitch here and that I'm going to put it at the maximum stitch length here. We're going to take the sleeve and we're going to go from this notch. We're going to go from this notch all the way to this notch twice, and we're going to separate them 0.5 centimeter. Remember, no back stitch here. And we leave a long tail. And we do the same half a centimeter or 1 centimeter difference. And here we have the 2 basting stitches. We're going to add this basting stitch in both sleeves, and once we're done, we can put right sides together of the sleeves, and then we add a top stitch to create this side seam of the sleeve. Once that's done, we iron it flat and we come back. Now that we have both sleeves, we're going to get our bodice and we're going to turn it inside out so the right sides are facing each other. The next thing we're going to do is make sure that the sleeve is on the right side so that the right sides are facing us. We make sure that all the notches from the sleeve and from the bodice are paired together. Now we have the sleeve, right sides against right sides. And we have all the notches together. So the side seams, this notch, the front notch, and the front one with the shoulder seam. And what we have to do now, do you see the basting stitches? What we have to do is pull these threads until the length of this part of the sleeve is the same as the front. And then when we reach that, what we can do is, instead of having this needle there, we put it on the front. And we go around this needle, so then it doesn't move. And with some needles, we secure this part of the sleeve. And the same with the other side. And now we just go around this circle, take into account the seam allowance, and then we can get rid of the basting stitches. And we do that for both sides. This is how it should look like. And what you can do now, it's not needed if your fabric doesn't fray, but otherwise you can add an overlock stitch here, both of them together, and then you always have to iron it to the shoulder, never to the inside of the sleeve, always to the shoulder. And that's it. Let's get into the finishes. For that, we're going to need bias tape. The bias tape looks like this, so it's going to be a piece of fabric that it's folded inside, and then it's folded to the middle. And what we're going to do is we're going to get our fabric right sides facing us, and we're going to attach the bias tape like this, all around, like this. And these finishes, you can close it a little bit in here, and then cut it here. And now we're going to sew through the first folded line, so around this line here, all the way. Let's go. We're going to have it like this. See, stitch all around. And now what we're going to do with the help of the iron, we're going to go one in. We're going to press it flat, and then we're going to fold it again through the middle, so covering the frame like this. And wherever there's too much fabric excess, then we can just cut that excess to make it flat. And once you have it pinned all the way, what we have to do, we have two options. We can do the stitch in the ditch, they call it, so that you just run a top stitch through the line between the bias tape and your fabric, or how I do it is doing it by hand. We're going to use the same method exactly for this bottom part, for the sleeves, and for the neck. So what we're going to do for the neck is we're going to go around this teardrop shape, and we're going to come back again. We're almost done. We only need to add the straps that we're going to use to tie this up. So how we're going to do it is exactly the same procedure that we used for the bias tape, but what we're going to do is leave a bit here, and then we're going to start adding the bias tape from there. And we're going to go around the neck, and then once we're done, we're going to leave the same amount of thread that we left on this side. We're finally done with the pattern, and it's time for me to tell you some tips and tricks on how to change your design a little bit. There are different things that we can do. So for example, the opening. You can either have it on the front, like this design, but you can also have it on the back, like this design here. It looks exactly the same, I know, but these will be the two fronts, and these will be the two backs. The only thing you have to do to change it is when we draw that teardrop shape, instead of putting it in the front, you have to put it in the back. That's it. Another thing we can do is change the shape of the sleeves. I showed you how to create the normal sleeve and also how to spread it out a little bit and create a bigger shape where you have more room. The bigger one is more comfortable and the smaller one is a bit more tight. So when you put your arms up, then the t-shirt is also going to come up a little bit. That's not the only thing you can do. Of course, you can make it longer or shorter or mid-arm or whatever you can imagine. The last thing that I can show you is how to do the finishes. Another thing you can do, this one is my favorite because that means that you don't have to do anything extra, is pick up a fabric that has already some nice finishes here. So the only thing you have to do is cut it through the edge of your fabric, and then you're going to have this and you don't have to finish it at all. And the last finishes you can do, this one is the one I'm wearing with my shirt. So what you can do is just take a piece of fabric, create the shape that you want, like this. See, this is the inside. I cannot show you because it's sewn together already. But we would have another fabric. We would create with the top stitch the shape that we want, then we would put it inside out and we would come up with this shape. See that it's a bit transparent in here? That is everything for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you make them. My Instagram is _NuriaMo. Don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!